Moments from now, Senator Harry Reid will take to that podium and he will launch an all-out attack on Donald Trump. He's going to lay out his plan to respond to, quote, the Republicans' platform of hate. We'll take you there, we'll listen for a short time, and then we'll have some commentary on what he has to say. Meanwhile, let's bring in Lisa Booth. Now, this is going to be an all-out attack on Donald Trump, calling him basically a hate monger. What do you make of this?
Well, it sure is, Stuart. And this is what we see from Democrats all the time. This is what they did with the whole War on Woman playbook. This is what they did with the Koch brothers. These are the kind of tactics that Democrats use. And look, we already know that the Democrat Senatorial Committee is launching something called the Party of Trump. And what they're looking at is a map that is arguably very tough for Republicans. Republicans are defending 24 seats to Democrats' 10. 7 of those seats Obama carried in 2008 and 2012, and all Democrats need is to pick up 4 seats, 5 if Democrats win the White House. So Republicans are facing a tough seat, and what they're going to do, Stuart, and I guarantee you this is what's going to happen, they're going to send out press releases and say, does X senator agree with Donald Trump on this issue? And then what's going to happen, because we have mainstream media that are all liberal, and same for the state and the local press corps as well, Stuart. And what they're going to do is they're going to go to that senator and ask them and try to get them on record about every single thing that Donald Trump says and every single thing that he's doing if he ends up being the nominee.
Now, Lisa, we may or may not like what Harry Reid has to say, but I would say he has been a very effective politician. And the strategy which you've just outlined would appear to me to have a large chance of success.
And it could potentially, because here's the thing. We know that Donald Trump's like Teflon, right? He is this political entity that nobody can understand. And, you know, nothing he says sticks to him. He is a shrewd, he's actually a shrewd politician, even though he's not a politician. He's someone who is a master showman when it comes to the media. But not every candidate is like that. And so the problem is some of the things he says might stick to some of these senators. And so they're best served to keep it local, focus on their state, focus on the issues that are relevant to the state and try to carry through. But, you know, when you're looking at states like Wisconsin, which, you know, I worked in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is pretty much a blue state in a presidential year. So, you know, anything that makes it more difficult for someone like Senator Johnson could make his path to getting reelected difficult.
But, you know, on a national level, as opposed to the local level that you're talking about, on a national level, there may be some reaction against Senator Reid. He's not wildly popular with anybody center-right. And I wonder if there might be a reaction against him and against what he's got to say today.
Well, potentially. I mean, look, I think Democrats overplayed their hands if you look at their attacks against the Koch brothers, because if you look at the Koch brothers, national polling would show us that the majority of Americans don't even know who they are. And in some of these states, they're job creators. I mean, I think with Donald Trump, he's a little bit more known of an entity, obviously. And so a lot of voters are going to know who he is. And, you know, Donald Trump has been able to turn out, Democrats, turn out voters who have previously not voted in elections. But we just simply don't know if that's going to carry down the ticket, if they're going to vote, if someone's turning out to vote for Donald Trump, who's previously been a Democrat or hasn't voted in previous elections. We don't know if they're going to vote for, you know, Republicans down ticket, as some voters do. So I think that's the big question mark of if Donald Trump wins the nomination, of how that carries down the ticket for many of these races, especially with such a difficult electoral map ahead of Republicans.
Lisa, thanks very much for joining us. We're still waiting for Senator Reid, so it is exactly what he's got to say about Donald Trump. You'll know as soon as we know. I'm going to move on to another attack on Trump. This is from the forecasting arm of The Economist. That's a British-based magazine. They put a Trump presidency on a par with jihadi terrorism in terms of global risk and threats to the globe. Ashley?
Believe it or not, says Donald Trump, if he becomes president, could have a very dangerous impact on a global economy. Why? Because he's hostile towards free trade, accuses China of currency manipulation. He advocates the killing of terrorist families, and he said at one point he would like to move troops into Syria to fight ISIS and then take its oil. All of that, says the Economist intelligence unit, makes Donald Trump a threat to the stabilization of the world economy. It is exactly the same rank. They rank 1 to 20. 25, 25 being the worst. He ranks with a rating of 12, which is also the same rating as Islamic terrorists.
This is the establishment on a global level all ganging up to say, we don't want Trump. We can't handle Trump. I think they're very worried about him.
Yeah, I think they are. And what they're saying, too, is he's just less risky than a collapse of the entire Eurozone. So I say take this with a grain of salt.
Just a little less risky than the collapse of the entire Eurozone?
That's what they think of him. They also say that they do not believe he could ever beat Hillary Clinton if it were for the presidential ticket, Clinton versus Trump. They said, don't worry, we're not that worried because he can't beat Hillary Clinton.
Okay, I'm saying nothing about that. Despite all of these attacks, Donald Trump, in my opinion, has a clear path to victory. Come on in, former Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush. That would be Brad Blakeman. Brad, I know who you are. Now I know you. Now, you've not been on this program very often, but now I know you. Now I can see you. All right, Brad, here's my opinion. I think Trump has a pretty clear path to the nomination, and it runs through the primaries in New Jersey, New York, and California, which come up on April 19th and then June the 7th. That's a pretty clear path to victory and getting the 1,237 delegates. Disagree with me?
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. But, you know, if you read the best book in the world, second to the Bible, The Art of the Deal, in The Art of the Deal, one of the most important parts of that book is closing the deal. And Donald Trump has yet to do that. He has less than 700 of the necessary 1,237. But I agree with you. He's certainly on a path to do that. The question is, can he close the deal before the convention? And that's still a real open question.
But it's a much more uphill struggle for Ted Cruz and
it is.
Certainly John Kasich.
No doubt about it. But if Trump wants to stay true to his own principles, then he's got to close the deal. He can't be talking about the fact that he's ahead now, everybody should get out of the race. They're not going to get out of the race. So it's up to him then to start closing the deal by winning these important states.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think of you, Brad, as an establishment guy. I mean, you may or may reject that label, I don't know. But I'm thinking of you as an establishment guy. Why don't you turn around and back Trump? Not necessarily back him, but engage him. Talk to the guy. Try to have some influence on the guy. Tell him to tone it down. Tell him to be more presidential. Tell him to don't create a trade war. If you worked with him as opposed to, demonizing the guy, maybe you'd have some influence.
No, I don't demonize him, but what I do is I have a lot of friends who are on his campaign. I certainly converse with all sorts of people. I am an establishment guy. I'm a traditionalist in the party, but that doesn't mean I'm anti-Trump. I'm going to support the nominee. I've come to that conclusion that it's much better to support Donald Trump than it is to lose to a Hillary Clinton or a Bernie Sanders or somebody else if Hillary has to leave the race. So I think you make excellent points. We should not be burning bridges within the Republican Party. We should try and come together as one party to defeat a Democrat in November.
Brad, you just slipped something in there in case Hillary has to leave the race.
Yes.
If she is indicted, or if the FBI recommends indictment, regardless of whether it's taken up by the Justice Department, you say that's cause for her to leave the race?
Absolutely. There's no way she would be able to continue if she's indicted. Look, the Justice Department is going to take on a life of its own if that happens. The process will prevent her. She will not have the time, the effort, and I believe she's not going to have the support. We're seeing it now, Stuart. Look, you have to be liked and trusted before you ever get to policy. She has a deficit within her own party in those areas. That would only magnify if she were indicted.
All right, Brad Blakeman, don't be such a stranger to the show.
I love being on your show.
You do?
I
Careful,
do.
You'll be back.